to the racks every week. Keep craving that rush that you get when you flip to the next page. Life is better when you're living between Wednesdays. Yes, say, got a massive back.
What's up, folks? I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews, and I'm joined today by Mark Bernal of LesserKnownComics, and they're going to let us know about a new comic they have coming out to Kickstarter very soon. So, Mark, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to see you again.
Absolutely. I love having you on. This is our third time, right?
At least second. You've had other folks from Lesser Known on. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. So this time we're here to talk about your comic, though. As always, just in case we have some new people out there, for the people in YouTube land who maybe have never seen your face, they don't know your name, they've never heard of Lesser Known Comics, who is Mark Bernal?
Mark Bernal, I accidentally started the comic book company in 2020. Started out with me trying to find some concept artists to work on a graphic novel that I was putting together. Fell in love with all the concept artists that I was working with. There was 3 of them. So I was like, oh, okay, well, let's just make 3 books. Instead, we'll make 3 comics rather than a graphic novel. And we started posting all our stuff to Instagram, and people started showing up and saying, hey, can I make a comic book with you too? And I was naive and new to the scene, and I was just like, sure, why not? So we started working with a bunch of folks, both people who were working on stories I was writing, and then people who were coming in with their own creator-owned stories. And the next thing I knew, it just kind of got away from me, so coming up to 2021 and 2022, we were just having some successive Kickstarters that were going really well. Some creators that were a lot more experienced coming to the team. So it's been like drinking out of a fire hose. And as of this summer, I was thinking like, oh man, I'm gonna slow down. I'm gonna maybe take a little bit of a pause, and then how life goes. We got the books Chiasm by Doug Knight, Tights by Chris Weigand. We got Yuriko by David Lujan, and then right after mine, another guy, Jade Louder, showed up with, he's got 2 comics. It's a horror story, or it's a horror show. And it's just like, okay, well, I guess my fall is going to be busy. But just the nicest and most hardworking people I've ran into. And, I get a lot of positive feedback that comes to me, but it's really just a reflection of the folks that I get to surround myself with. And, over the last year, I also have been trying to focus on bringing creators into my orbit that give me energy, positive energy, right? And folks like yourself and folks, from, even if they're not publishing with us, it makes such a difference more than anything else. Time, money, talent, any of that stuff, that can ebb and flow based on, just your luck. But when you work with folks who just like pump you up every day, and like that makes all the difference. So going into 2023, we got a bunch of stuff, including some books by me. Awesome. And I'm really stoked for it.
Perfect. Well, congratulations. I appreciate, like you said, it kind of tumbled and snowballed, and all of a sudden now you're a comic book publishing house that is working with multiple teams, putting out multiple books. It's awesome. Congrats.
Thanks. It took my wife by surprise. She was just like, we're actually in New York the other weekend, and an illustrator that I'm working with, we met up, for lunch, and she was there. So the 3 of us, and he was like, oh, isn't it great that you do, your husband's doing all this comic book stuff? And she's like, yeah, some days I could take it or leave it. You seem like a nice guy,
That is so funny. Well, I'm glad you got to meet them. Like, that's so cool. One thing that's continually come up, and you've experienced it yourself, and come up in my interviews, is just the indie comics community, it's not, oh, it's based in New York, it's based in LA, it's based in Toronto. It's, well, there's one dude over here, and there's another dude over there, and then, this lady's up here, and, this other person's down there, and it's like, it's kind of everywhere. So when you get to travel to New York and see cool stuff and meet up with people, it's fantastic. So congrats.
Yeah, it's crazy. So Franco Luna, who I'm doing the book that's releasing on the 18th, Either Them or Us, we've done 4 books together. I've never met him in person. He lives in Mendoza, Argentina. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on, FaceTime and stuff like that. But it's crazy, yeah. And he uses an ink, a colorist that I've maybe said, a handful of sentences to, and I've never met him either. So it's very unique. It's almost like having a band, but like when you go on tour, you don't have to bring the whole band with you. It's a very odd dynamic.
Yeah, it's fascinating, especially because thankfully for digital, we can scan stuff and send stuff over computer. Yeah, it's getting wild. So yes, that is who Mark is, which is fantastic. Tell us about your book.
Yeah, so I built this universe. So Lesser Known Comics, I've done a bunch of these serialized Lesser Known Comics #1 through, we're at 7, featuring this main character Danny. She's like she's been around since the 1850s. She stumbled her way into magic, and like many of us, maybe wouldn't read all the fine print, on spell books and things like that. And she's kind of a woman that's lived a bunch of different lifetimes. So ranging from the Old West to she's a witchcraft arms dealer in South America in the 80s. In our Death Wish comic, she's racing, race cars and stuff like that. So I kind of created her to be like our Wolverine that we can just place pretty much anywhere in time and around the world. And Either Them or Us follows a portion of the story arc that takes place in Japan in the 1980s. And we have a lot of the story that traverses both California and then South America. And I've always been fascinated by Japanese influence in both, the West Coast of the United States and then also in South America. I was in Peru once traveling and came to realize that Peru had a Japanese president, and that ceviche and things like that are all like very influenced by Japan. Yeah, they had a Japanese president. It always blows me away.
Cool.
They actually, their name for him was El Chino, which is so like whatever,
Sure.
It's like, close enough. Sure, close enough. Yeah, and I've just been fascinated by any confluence of cultures and things like that. So we had a portion of a story arc with Japanese characters in this Japanese company that we hadn't really built out, but Franco, who does a lot of the art for me, he was like, hey, we really have to do more stuff in Japan. I really want to do more of the samurai stuff and Japanese witches. Can we just get to that story arc now? And I was like, sure. So he was in the driver's seat. It was not a portion of like the lore or canon that I was anticipating getting to right now. But we had a blast. And like with many things, I give him the theme and I give him the layout of the pages, and where the story has a theme of, samurais and witches and generational feuds. So taking that from the 1860s and the abolition of samurai through, World War II and the Reconstruction. And what if the witches use that as a way to, even try and stamp out that samurai, bloodline by implicating them in war tribunals and crimes and things like that. So you fast forward to the 1980s, and now you have that generational rivalry, and plus the 80s are fun, the fashion there of like, not just like the punk rock stuff or the cyberpunk or all that kind of stuff, but also like when Franco drew one of the secretaries working in one of the offices, I was like, oh my god, it looks like Working Girls. Like it's like
Oh,
very like
cool.
80s, like the
Yeah.
hair looked the way, and I forget that stuff. I don't necessarily think about that when I'm writing it, but then when you have a
Yeah.
visual storyteller that really does their homework, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is better than I imagined it. And with many things with him, we use the Marvel method. I tell him, you know, here's the beginning and end of the fight scene, but I'm not going to tell you, how this fight scene is going to go blow by blow. And funny thing on this story too, he even changed the ending on me on the first issue. He
Oh.
waited till he turned into inks and he said, "Well, I didn't like where you ended it, so I changed the ending." And I was like, "Yeah, this is much better." Frank, you know, uh, and I've just been blessed that any time to work with an illustrator that has um, that much confidence, and then also confidence in our relationship, that he's like, Mark won't mind, it'll be fine. Um, that definitely is great, and the comics all the better for it. So
I love it. Like the one, kudos to the teamwork and the trust and I don't know the word camaraderie, maybe, or I guess just teamwork that you've built between yourself and him, for him to be able to do that. Also for him as a artist to be able to go, you know what, I have a better idea, and I know my teammate will work out with that. That's so cool. And also, like, yeah, like you said, like when they do the research, it brings the world to such a more visually uh, interesting place. Because, like you said, he could have drawn the secretary any way that he wanted, but he was like, wait, how did they do it in Japan in the 80s? What was the fashion? What was the trends? Pull it up, look at it, figure it out concept, and then draw it. Like, that's so cool.
one of the things that I feel like it's fun, but it's a little bit of cheating for continuity. Is the story does take place in a fictional city. So we said, okay, it's called Kaijo City. It's basically the witches have taken over essentially like a Tokyo size,
Nice.
city, and um, the samurai bloodline is they're basically almost like a rival company in this 80s like booming business era, and they're fighting it out with their henchmen and whatnot. um, but it took a little bit of the pressure off to be like, okay, it can be Japan in the 1980s, but I can change some things and not
Yeah.
really have to worry about. And we did that a little bit with fictitious cities. In our Oakland in our universe is not Oakland. We call it Oaklandia. And it was just because I needed the suburbs to be a little closer to make some plot points work. So I was like, hey, I'll make this city slightly different. Um, so I don't know if that's cheating or but I hope to at least someday make cities that are kind of like Gotham, where Gotham has it's a character in of its own, right?
Oh God, yeah. No, I don't think that's cheating. I think that's artistic liberty, and you're putting the story and people's enjoyment before geography, which is far more important anyway. Um, and I mean, yeah, no, if you can get to a point as a creator where the setting that you're putting someone in is as complex and interesting as they themselves are, that's good storytelling to me. Like I like that. So absolutely do whatever you need. Like, um, yeah. One thing I did want to ask. There's two things we've sort of touched on, which was the '80s, and then samurais and witches. So I guess first, um, there's been a lot of stuff about the '80s recently. So Stranger Things over the last couple of years, the remake of the Ghostbusters. Um, while not directly '80s, Cyberpunk 2077, the game, has a lot of neon, and that was very prominent in the '80s. Um, was your desire to sort of play in that time a recent decision, or was that, from the inception of the project? Or I guess even with that, I need to ask, when did you start coming up with this comic?
Yeah. So I started writing it in 2020. and a lot of it was split between present day and the 1850s Wild West kind of. And then as I was building those two story arcs and making, some backstory to it, then I was finding all these different places. But I also used the Lesser Known Comics universe as a sandbox for illustrators to come and work, because not all of it's written out. Like I have ideas and themes that are definitely going to stay the whole way through. But if an illustrator comes, so Abel Garcia, he did a book with us, LKC number 6, and he wanted to do something set in Morocco.
Ooh.
And he was, so he made that book with us. And so I just started building out the story arc for that portion of the universe. So it gives me a chance to work with an illustrator, and then forces me to be like, okay, where was my character at what point in time would bring her to Morocco? And then it's almost like script writing meets Sudoku, where I have all the things that I need to do, but there's a little bit of limitations, and I have to, figure out how to make some things work. So with the 1980s, I knew, talking to Franco, that we wanted to cover the 1980s in South America because it's such a crazy time. Everything from the drug trade to the fixing of soccer matches and things like that. Like, all that stuff is. So we kind of came up with the idea that she was going to be that witchcraft arms dealer living a Pablo Escobar lifestyle somewhere in the 1980s.
Very cool.
In South America. Because he's from Mendoza, Argentina. We placed it there.
Oh, okay.
Initially, it was going to be Peru, but we, so as we built the story arc going out to those supporting characters. So in one of the other books he does, he runs into, you get some appearances of the witches and one of our baddies for the samurai crew. They're interacting with the Danny character in South America. So it's all happening in the 80s. So we're like,
it fit.
Let's do that portion of it, because he was just really, he was like, I just want to draw some stuff with some swords. So like let's show the backstory of those two factions warring, and we'll come around to linking it to the rest of the universe later. I'm not going to argue with you. It's an easy sell. Samurais versus witches.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's the more that we talk in whether it's on film for YouTube land or elsewhere when we've just sort of chit chatted either before recording or over email. I always get the sense that Lesser Known Comics is like a creator's playground. You called it a sandbox earlier, from the world being, as long as you can find somewhere to fit, come play. But like, it just sounds like you guys are having way too much fun over there. That's it. It's just cool. When it comes to then the samurais and the witches and the feud between the two factions from 1850, when samurais were being outlawed, decommissioned, up until 100 and some odd years later in 1980. I guess my question about all of that is basically, there is so many cool myths, legends, monsters, creatures, different takes on like vampires and witches, for instance, from what the Western stories are, like a Dracula as a vampire, for instance, very different from like what a Japanese vampire looks like. So I guess your witches in your story, are they based on one particular legend from Japan? Are they based on an amalgamation of a few different things? Like, how'd you come up with them?
The tricky part on it was that before I knew we were going to spend so much time in Japan, and actually we have story arcs that'll take us to China and the Philippines as well, just because I I like to pick areas of the world that I'm interested in, and I've traveled to both China and the Philippines.
Nice.
The What's happening in the story in the United States and South America, once again, is like a reflection of some backstory we're doing. So, in issue 1, you'll get little sneak peeks of what this magic is. But what we'll end up building out is that in the 1860s, when the samurai find out that they're horrendously outmatched by the witches, they spend the next 120 years traveling to try and find these supernatural elements in East Asia that would gather some of the, spells, artifacts, weapons, things that all have supernatural ability like imbued in them, that they can build this arsenal. And now they are finally ready to take on these witches. So the main character or the leader of the samurai faction is carrying on this legacy, that's generational, where he doesn't really know why, except for he knows we hate these people.
Yep.
And my ancestors, before me have, acquired and amassed this weapons cache, this supernatural weapons cache, to one day, wage war, and him wrestling with that. Is it finally time for me to, take the fight, back to the witches and reclaim this, this land that they think is rightfully theirs.
I'm excited.
and for me too, it gives me it. Because I'd be lying if I said I'm familiar with every single aspect of, because I get messages from people that, oh, is this going to be in the comic? And I was like, and I had to Google some of the things that people threw at me, and I was like, okay, well, this is good, because when I write about the discovery of this, I can write it in the same way that those samurai clan had discovered it in order to. Hey, they say that there's something going on with vampires in this part of the country, and they might be of help to our cause, and, watching how that play off and naturally asking the questions that I would ask in those situations, right? Like, well, do we want to go find out if they can be brought to our side, or are we just going to get holes in our neck? That's so. Those kind of things I think will arise naturally, as I go through the writing process for all that.
Awesome. One thing then, important thing to ask. So this comic, again, in the title being Either Them or Us, correct?
Yes.
So Either Them or Us is focusing on these two factions, samurai and witches. But those characters, as you mentioned, have appeared in the lesser-known comics. Do folks need to have read those in order to read this, or can they just dive into this?
They can dive into this, definitely. And actually, what we've put out now, we have available like on Global Comics, like you can go read the lesser-known comics stuff for free, and then also there's free download stuff for a lot of our stuff on the website, LesserKnownComics.com. But they should be able to jump right into it, and it should. I mean, you might get some Easter eggs and stuff like that, if you read all the other stuff. But for the most part, it is standalone. The nice part about the comics is, and the way we structure things, is that the illustrators are actually stealing off of each other within, because there's no one illustrator that's working on the entire lesser known universe. So we have Abel working on what's happening in Morocco and Spain, and we have Franco doing the stuff in Japan, and then we have my buddy RJ is doing stuff in Alaska with Wendigos and things like that.
Cool.
And they see the other reference art, and it's interesting to watch what they fixate on, and through a series of incoherent text messages between all of us, then it goes, oh yes, we have to add that to continuity, and then like it ends up being something, like a magical artifact or a factor of the magic, that has to be carried out throughout. So you'll find things like severed hands tend to be somewhere snuffed throughout all the, and you just be like, oh, okay. So like whose severed hand is that? And we're in the process of like working out like a crazy crazy murder mystery, of where this severed hand artifact is making its way through everybody's book.
Again, you folks are having too much fun. I like that kind of stuff as someone who reads a lot of comics. Like I'm a big fan of DC, right? So like I'll read a lot of Batman and then Justice League, Action Comics. So when you get that kind of stuff, which is fairly infrequent, I love it. And the fact that throughout the various comics you're putting out, your artists are just like, that thing, yeah, what is it? Yeah, cool. Over here now, please. That's hilarious. And that you're kind of all coordinating on it is even better. Folks out there in YouTube land, if you want really fun, cool comics, links down below. Check out Lesser Known Comics. Go now, get them all. As Mark said, there are free stuff you can download to get into it. And then there are Kickstarters like are either them or us that you can join into. I think then we've kind of covered fairly well the book. I don't want to get into spoiler territory. In the press kit that you sent my way, you mentioned that for basically the comic, it is nearly done or will be ready to print by the time the campaign launches, which at time of recording this is three days out, right? The 18th.
Yeah.
By the time it's edited, it'll probably be day of. So if you're watching this now, you can go and back this comic. I guess my question was, not why, because like it makes sense, but yeah, you know what? Screw it. Why have it done before the campaign? Because classically, if you see like an indie artist, they're just, it might be them, like an artist and a writer, or just one creator who is like, here's my idea for a comic. I want to make it. I need the Kickstarter to pay for certain things so I can have it colored, or I can have the time to draw it, and rent needs to get paid and then published and all this stuff. You have it basically done and ready to go to print now, or very soon from now. Why the choice? And is it caused because you have Lesser Known Comics where you're having all of these comics made, so you have kind of a slush fund of let's pay people and keep the ball rolling?
Yeah, I think Kickstarter. So simple answer, I think Kickstarter has turned into a marketplace in of its own. Just like you could go to Amazon or you can go to wherever, because just the same as once you back one campaign, it gives you recommendations of other campaigns, and then also if you back a creator at the point that they launch another campaign, you'll get notified again, hey, that thing that you liked last time, and then because we've ran so many campaigns as well, I think it also helps give us some metrics as to let's get a window into what 30 days look like, and we don't have to manage all the metrics of that. Kickstarter does it on their own. And the big thing that we measure more than the actual funding totals is, do we have new backers? Do we have returning backers? If those numbers are going in a positive direction, for whatever reason, the number of the funding total will change because the cost of the book changes, or maybe it's a bad month, like maybe taxes were due, or it's holiday season or something, or maybe there's just a lot of really cool campaigns that month, but we don't have to really beat ourselves up in the fact that we're like, hey, we got new backers and we had backers come back. Like, as long as those two things are like happening, then it's all good. And I think that Kickstarter is a good platform in which it's an easy way in the indie community to point to other people. Because, yeah, like there are folks who are at different points. They've either created the entire book and they're launching now, or they're at the beginning of launch or creating a book and they're trying to get the funds ahead of time. But regardless, if it's a cool project and I want to say, hey, check out this other creator on the platform, like I wish places like Zoop and Indiegogo were more interconnected.
Okay.
But the way it goes is I think the Kickstarter is the primary platform for indie comic books. And I know that some people, when I send them a Zoop link or an Indiegogo link, they're like, I have to log into a whole new account, and it's like, so I think because Kickstarter is by default kind of, the indie comic marketplace of choice right now, I think it makes sense just to keep launching books, on it.
Nice. Then in that case, let's talk about the Kickstarter campaign, because the book itself sounds awesome. It sounds like a crazy mash between, like, I don't know, Xena Blade and Samurai Jack. What are the tiers going to be? Whether they're digital comics, physical comics, are there going to be bonuses? Prints, I imagine. Usually, I believe you guys do some prints. As of now, do you know what you're going to offer?
So typically how we do stuff is whether or not you whatever book you get or whatever tier, you're going to end up with, bookmarks and postcard size prints and bigger prints and stuff like that. And that's just because we found that planning for stretch goals, you might as well budget for it like you were going to purchase it anyway. So to say like, oh, we're going to unlock this thing, I understand that some people are good enough at math to do that. I'm just not one of them. So I'm not knocking anybody who does stretch goals. I'm saying I'm not talented enough to do that. So I just say, these are all the things we're going to throw in as freebies. As for the actual book, we do digital because we've, initially I pushed back on digital because I just like physical comics so much, but I understand because of shipping overseas that, digital is really how people can support you from places where they can't, where shipping is too much. So we have the digital, physical. Then we have a variant cover done by a guy, Reese Jenkins, and he's the one I visited up in New York. Totally different style. Whereas, Franco's kind of got that classic American comic book style that feels very like, I think it feels very like 90s, Marvel DC. Reese's stuff is that kind of like urban manga, like kind of
cool.
More like Boondocks, kind of style. So he did an awesome variant cover for us, and then since he's here in the States, he's going to do any of our custom sketch covers. So if you want a custom sketch cover by him, like a one of one, he'll be the one doing those. And then also we have sketch covers that we do make available that are blank for, fellow artists who are like, yeah, I'll just give me the comic with a blank cover and, I'll make my own cover for it. Which it seems to be a popular thing. And then in addition to that, we have tiers that have the rest of the lesser known universe comics that all take place within the story arc of this story. So if you want to just know what else is going on in the lesser known universe around this, I kind of already group those together that way. And then tiers for people who are new to lesser known comics, they're just like, hey, I want to just pay for shipping once and I want to get everything on the lesser known spinner rack. Like, that's all there. And then for add-ons, we also have onesie twosies. So books like Tights and stuff like that are available on there. and which is really cool. David Lujan, who's doing the Yuriko comic that's will have just closed by the time this airs. It was really cool to see him send something out in group chat, and he was like, "Hey guys, look how many of your books we were able to sell during my campaign," because he did the same thing on his, and that's what we do, right? So it's like, as a creator, I remember Chris from Tights, he looked at it and he was like, "That's cool. I didn't have to, like, I'm just sitting at my house." Like, yeah, he retweets, Yuriko stuff because Yuriko's badass. But like, he's like, someone's out there like selling a handful of my comics, and and people are discovering my books, through somebody else's campaign, and that's just it's a really cool feeling. They're like, Mark's evil plan to is working out. And it's like, yes. I was hoping it was.
That's incredible. So, one, great thinking. So, as a recap, so someone in Japan could get a digital copy sent to them, no problem. Obviously, it's an email away. You can get physical copies if you're in the States. Anywhere else?
You can get them worldwide. Just the shipping cost goes up. A lot of the folks who get them from overseas will end up getting a bunch of comics in one, because that way
it's worthwhile. Yeah,
they'll get our higher end tiers.
Okay, and super cool question. So you mentioned you have a tier where you can get either them or us, but also all of the connected comics where Danny makes appearances, or rather, I guess, where the samurai and witch factions make appearances. And then there's one of just, here's the whole catalog. How many comics are in those? And do you have the figure yet worked out for the cost of them? Because those sound super cool.
Yeah. I don't have it in front of me because I would refer to my phone, but I'm using my phone.
Yeah, that's how you're talking to me. Yeah.
But the total number we have, let's see, actually, I got all the books right here in front of me. So I think we're at 13 comic books, like Saddle Stitch. And then we had 4 graphic novels, but one of the creators for our graphic novel, for the Digital Lizards of Doom, they actually just got signed to a bigger publisher, which, woohoo, like, so it was, we compare it to when your hot ex gets married, you're like happy for them, but then you're like, but they'll never be, oh well, so, so yeah, but we also have the graphic novel. I was looking if it was over my shoulder, but Tank McGregor and the Mechanical Menace, which is a fantastic graphic novel. So I think I don't know the total up about it, but it ends up coming out pretty reasonable, especially for the amount of comics that it is.
Like that's like a stack of books.
Because really, what you're getting, the savings there too, is on the shipping. Because I'm gonna put them nice in the Gemini mailer and all that stuff. So it ends up coming out really good.
Good, awesome. It's so cool, and I think you're the only. To be fair, you're the only comic book publisher that I've interviewed like this. It's a cool idea to do, because you're taking the work off the shoulders of someone who's going to be like, oh, you know what, I really liked either them or us. I also want to read more about Danny, or I also want to read more about the other stuff that goes on. And you're just like, here you go. You want all of it? Here you go. Nice, easy spot. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to hunt. Because I do it a little bit, but not too much. But I know there are comic readers out there who they crave that stuff. They want to see these huge interconnected universes and all of those references that we were talking about. And I personally appreciate that you've made that easy.
I think we have a long way to go. It's one of those things that like it's not until I look back that I'm like, oh man, we have produced quite a bit of comics, because it's musicians suffer this from all the time. They're like, yeah, like this last album was good, but wait till the new album comes out, right? It's like it's so hard to look back and actually like, and I'm trying to get better about that, because I used to play music, and I remember we played shows with, maybe it was 500 people at the venue, and I was always like, when are we going to play the show with 1,000 people at the venue? And I didn't enjoy it at the time, and I'm really trying to take the time to enjoy where we are in the journey, because there's actually 15 books or so that are pretty much done that just haven't been released yet, and it's a matter of just getting the lettering done and doing like the design work, and then figuring out when we're going to release it. And then, because I'm an idiot and I didn't think ahead when bringing all these amazing creator-owned books in, just on the creator-owned series between Tights, Yuriko, David, who made Yuriko, actually has another book called Narita that's amazing. Doug Knight has his chiasm book, Tank McGregor, so that's 5 books right then. So that's 5 months of the year that are already spoken for Kickstarters, and it's like, wow, when are we gonna release these, and how are we gonna release these, and how are we gonna do it in a way that does justice, that not everybody has a because you don't want one comic book to come out right on the heels of another and have somebody's sales be diminished because we just didn't do a good job of picking when we released it.
Exactly.
But luckily we have a great group that's very empathetic, and we can talk about it, and we can figure out best ways, and that's been the most important thing with everybody I work with, is if you don't have ability to have empathy, the lesser known comics is not going to be a very good spot for you. But the folks who are able to practice that, it's really, really rewarding, especially when I get to see those interactions like, hey dude, look how many of your books I sold. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and them knowing like, and it may be like, oh, I only made you $100 here or something like that, or, but they're just like excited that they did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a real good, good vibe to have in the group.
That's so cool. I would love, I appreciate it doesn't exist. There is not like a big room of all of you that I could just, be a fly in the wall on, because you're out everywhere, you're texting each other and stuff, but it would be so cool to be able to do that and just watch people have those kind of interactions, because like that kind of, and I don't want to use a fancy word, but that kind of team synergy where everyone's just feeding off of each other, that's so cool. And like that's a part of what I want comics to be, right? It shouldn't be like, no, this is my character and this is the way that they are and no one else can draw them. It's like, have some flexibility. Like you can have a lot of fun with stuff if you're willing to. I think another question that I do want to ask, because you have a lot of books, you have many coming out soon, or well, one per month, which is actually really smart. I commend you on that. For the books that exist that people want to buy, but say they miss a Kickstarter, do you have a way currently for them to go online and like buy a book and get it shipped to them?
Yeah. So, excuse me. LesserKnownComics.com has some books available on there. I tend to think that waiting for the next Kickstarter tends to be better if you're a person who tends to use Kickstarter, just because you're going to get more bang for your buck. But there's also like TankMcGregorComic.com has like that book for sale and stuff like that. And same thing, I think Tights Comic has a website as well, and he's got books for sale on there. And that's talk about working with great people. It's the folks where we can have a conversation about whether it's sold on their platform, on the Lesser Known Comics platform, or on Kickstarter. Like the good news is the books are getting sold, right? So like and we have a lot of conversations about, let's have a dialogue about, what's best for the artist and what's best for, the group as a whole as well, like when it comes to that, because we do, if it is best for the artist, we want to direct people to their particular website.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not best for the artist, like how do we make that work? And that's kind of a little bit of behind the scenes stuff, but those are the things that kill most. The reason you don't see this kind of arrangement in other places, because bigger publishers say you're not selling it on your website anymore. You're selling it
it's through
here
us.
now.
That's it.
And then the same thing with like the IP, or same thing with being like, oh, you can't put that into an anthology, or you can't do like, and that's where being very cautious about the folks that we work with, because not everybody is always that easy, but like folks like Chris, from Tights, and Doug from Chiasm, and David, I bring those up because they've been on your show. It's just such a breath of fresh air to be like, like even when we come across the unexpected, that they're going to say, okay, this is not what we expected, but let's figure out a way to make this work together.
Yeah. I have so many questions now about that. But I don't want to take away from your comic, because it is your comic. Maybe we'll end up doing another interview where we touch on it. But I guess we've thoroughly covered all the details that I can think of. Is there anything about either them or us that we haven't touched on that you want to talk about and make sure that people know?
I think that we're well into working through that story arc. Like everything, illustration is the most expensive portion of it. So getting success of this campaign and getting that illustrator, as much money in his pocket so that he can work on it.
Pay your artists.
The other thing that people don't understand about illustrators too is they get in a zone, right? So you can't do something for a particular amount of time, stop, and then restart and expect them to be in that same zone. It's a great story arc, and we've actually have other writers that are working on it with me. There's a podcast, Apollo City Comics. One of the guys, Brandon Blocksdorf, I was like, hey, you want to help me write this? And he was like, yeah, ninjas or samurais and witches. Yeah, absolutely. Happy at that.
Sweet.
And that'll be nice for me to also experience not just the illustrators playing in the sandbox, but also writers coming in. Because I am a new writer, and the more writers that I work with, they're gonna make me better at my craft as well.
Then, you know what? Actually, on that note, I guess my most curious part is not from a business perspective, but from a creative perspective. What have been like the top one or two moments, or maybe let me rephrase that. What has been the top moment that you've had while doing what you're doing currently for Mark as a creator, and what has been like the top moment that you can think of for Mark, leader of Lesser Known Comics?
I think as a creator, I think the big thing was when I started to have like the realization that folks that I was I'm super lucky at the folks that have done illustration, and that's all they do, like with me, where they're only illustrating my books or the books that I'm writing. But then there's folks like David Lujan and Jade Lauder, who did the It's a Horror Show, that were like, hey, can I work on your stories too? Like, can I do my creator-owned stuff, but then also work on yours? And I was like, and I know that they're writers, so it's such like a I don't know, like the cavalry sound, right? Like, like, they're showing, and you're like, yes, like, absolutely. I would love to have, somebody who's been on this journey and knows how, like, what it's like to, like, wake up and hear that voice in your head where you're just like, you're terrible at this and you should give up, blah, 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 like, because, artists get that all the time, writers get that all the time. That's stupid. Why'd you write that down? Like, you'll never be Alan Moore. And so that's been huge for me personally, like, just that somebody who I really, because the illustration, obviously anybody who draws is going to be better than me because I'm not doing any drawing.
Same here.
But when a writer, another writer says, I want to work within your universe, and I that's very humbling, because I'm like, I think that your universe is better than mine. I don't know why you'd want to spend some time in mine, but okay, sure, come on in. So that's been a good spot. For the company, the big shout out I have to give to is to Doug Knight, from but before we went on, I described him as the nicest asshole you'll ever meet.
So accurate.
Because he, it was a tough summer. It was a tough summer. We had, I had some issues where just a lot of butting of heads and things like that, and folks that unfortunately won't be able to work with anymore. And I was kind of just down on myself and whatnot. And Doug, first off, with the Chiasm book, he was like, yeah, that's all nice, Mark, but I'm going to make some comics. So, like, get on board, So we, like, released the Chiasm thing, and he was just very much like, there's just no room for excuses in life, and kind of like, but as nice as a person. And obviously coming from, like, the background he's had with, like, being legally blind and having childhood cancer and stuff like that, it's really hard to get down on yourself. Like, being like, hey, Doug, life's really hard, and he's like, oh, I can't drive myself places.
Yeah.
It's just like, he just came in at the right time to give me the kick in the ass that I needed at the right time. And I told him multiple times that I really thank him. And I think that the success that we're going to experience in 2023 is largely due to him, being where he was, this summer. So that's been one of the most positive experiences, I think.
Right place, right time. Thank you, Doug. That's an apt description. He is the nicest asshole you'll ever meet. He's super straightforward. Like you mentioned earlier, he won't let you get down on yourself. If you're trying to be negative, he's just like, no, just, yeah. He's honestly, he's fantastic. When I got to interview him, it was different because he just has such a charisma and a personality. And with all the stuff that he's gone through, specifically regarding making comics, him being legally blind, the term he let me know was, I believe it was critically or extremely visually impaired. And then he sort of explained to me, like, the setup he has with these huge, I guess, like a visor or glasses where he can get really close in and then he can draw. It's hard to, like you said, oh, I'm so stressed out, life is so hard right now, and he's just like, shut up. Like, you'll be fine. Like, I've been through some shit, I've gotten through worse, we'll get you through it. We relate too, because we both had 2 kids. And awesome. Like, yeah, it does make me, like, shut up when I'm like, oh, okay, like, because he was telling me this story about the kids moving furniture in the house, and that's like a much bigger deal, right? And it's, and I was just like, I never, it's funny because when I talk to him, I never think of those things, but it's good. We relate as creators and writers, business owners and as parents, so it's very positive friendship. Fantastic. Well, I'm glad that you could get to know him, bring him into the team, and work with him. And I look forward to 2023 with your next 15 books. Um, I think then, you know what, we're at the end of the interview. You've survived the gauntlet, so to speak. Then my last two questions, as always. Mark, what are you currently reading?
I'm going to show off two things I just finished.
Oh, okay.
This is this
Oh,
is Sasquatch Vikings by Tardigrade Press. This is not the standard cover. This is the one done by an artist, Liam Jones. But the creative team is Chad Leduc, Daryl Sawatsky. I get a cheat back here. But they got a lot of folks over there. Bob Little is another artist that does Fatal Charades. But great group of folks. And then the other one that from the indie group is so they're called Mad Cloud Comics, and this is one of their titles, Bahati, and fellow veteran. So both me and him had been in the Army or he was Air Force, I was Army. But Mad Cloud, they actually got a campaign going right now. At the time that this will release, and anything they make is really good. And it's been really nice to have somebody else kind of come onto the scene a little bit after us and like just start cranking out some really, really cool stuff, and then being like, hey, like, and kind of talking and sharing those experiences. And then on the non-indie stuff, I may have said last time I was on, I've been going to X-Men chronological order. So I finally started the Claremont run.
nice.
So Count Nefario and all that stuff. So
Remind me, were you doing that as the omnibuses, or were you doing it digital? like how did you end up with the comics?
I have to do it digitally because the website has every Avengers, Spider-Man,
Nice.
whatever listed, like nested in the chronology. So
Okay.
right before the Claremont run, they had essentially canceled X-Men. There was and X-Men shows up in Spider-Man and Avengers and all this other stuff, and then the whole transformation of Beast, I didn't know this, happened in Amazing Adventures number 11 through 17. So just random things showing Beast turning into the blue Beast we know. And talking about continuity, that was weird to read, because seeing that stuff where at the same time Spider-Man's teaming up with the X-Men and they're like, where's Beast? And he's like, he's dealing with some stuff right now. And I was like, good continuity.
Nice. That's so cool. I never knew that, because folks for the folks out there at home who are not hardcore, God, what would that? It's not Golden Age. It's not modern though, is it? The Claremont run, or the original run, I should say, of X-Men. I forget which age it is. Forgive me. But Beast originally was just like a really thick dude. In like a getup. He was not blue, he was not furry. Well, he's kind of furry. But he was just like a big dude. So it's fascinating to know that he became blue as a lot of people know him via Spider-Man. Interesting.
Yeah, and then I've also noticed that some of the characters' names in those ones, they reuse the names but slightly different in the X-Men animated series, because they group on the X-Men animated series. Like Dr. Corbo is somebody who Xavier uses to help, figure some stuff out, but in the animated series is a random, astronaut. And I was like, it's like, it's pretty interesting to see those adaptations, so my nerd trivia is gonna spike. I feel like in the next month or two, you take me to trivia night, I'm gonna be your ringer.
You're gonna kill it. For you personally, if you go on Instagram and look up Group of Seven Comics, or Chris Sanigan or Jason Lapidus, who are the writer and artist, they actually do a little I guess you could call it a podcast, but they basically go out live on Instagram I think it's weekly, quite frequently, and they're doing exactly that, where they'll read an issue each, they'll get on live, and they just kind of talk about it. I think I'm behind on it, but I believe last I saw they were in the Phoenix Saga. Might be interesting for you to check out.
Yeah.
Either way, I'm glad that you're going through and getting the classics as well as enjoying the indie. I think then the last question I have for you, Mark, what is it that you want the folks out there to know?
Just not to be a stranger. If you're a creator out there and you wanted to figure out how we did certain things, like definitely shoot us an email. A lot of stuff in terms of advising people on Kickstarter and things like that, regardless if they publish with us, we do stuff like that. Same thing with like our print runs. We do some stuff where we help people save some money on printing by jumping on our bulk print runs, because we print a ton of books. So they come and they ask us, hey, can you print some of these books, and we might be able to get them a cheaper price.
That's so nice.
But and we just I feel like we're reciprocating what the indie comic community has done for us. So I don't think that we're doing anything that somebody hasn't already done for us as well. So it may seem altruistic, but I feel like I'm reciprocating like such a warm welcome that we've gotten from so many amazing creators. I'm always astounded too, some of the people who have spent the time just entertaining my ignorance, that I'm just like, and I'm like, wow, like you're that talented and that busy, and you spent some time just like talking to my ignorant face. I just feel like super, super privileged on that. So, and other than that, yeah, at LesserKnownComics on Instagram, and at LesserKcomics, the best we could do on Twitter. Don't hesitate to send us a note. Just say hi. That's the best way to get a hold of us.
Beautiful. You heard it here, folks, from the man himself. Reach out if you're interested in getting involved. Go for it. If you just want to talk shop, do it. Now is the time. That was the call. Go. Absolutely, Mark. It was fantastic to have you on again. We will have to do this again for one of, if not many, of your future books. But thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Konrad.
Absolutely. And for the folks out there in YouTube land, thank you for tuning in. Check out Mark's stuff, LesserKnownComics.com once again, and leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day, yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter columns. Can't find issue 2? Yeah, collector problems, cliffhangers, mysteries, you need answers. When did Batman become Green Lantern? I get it, true believer, not lying. Always up for an awesome summer crossover.